Science,
engineering,
medicine,
chemistry,
physics,
biology, humanities, cardiology,
computer, public health, global
aeronautics, science communication.
Greetings everyone, I'm Gareth Mitchell. Today, miscarriage and the role of the male's sperm, and some bioinspired tech for wound healing. Both of those are stories in our news section, and we'll bring you that in just a moment. Also in this edition, the NHS makes plans for the new year, and indeed the next decade. And we also hear from the Imperial researchers on their way to this year's Davos. And we have tattoos, smart ones, that could be lifesavers.
Our tattoos change color in response to changes in your body. This is very critical especially for diabetic patients. Our sensors change color from, let's say, green to red as the concentration of the glucose changes in your blood.
The Imperial College Podcast.
First though, let's catch up on some of the news happenings around the college, and we're going to begin with you, Kate Whiten, and you've been writing about multiple miscarriages and how that relates to the quality of male sperm. So just fill us in a little bit more on this story.
This was a really interesting study. It was looking at patients who'd suffered recurrent miscarriages, which is when a couple have suffered 3 miscarriages consecutively. And what the researchers wanted to do was look at the quality of the sperm of the man in this partner, because we know lots about the health of the woman and how that links into miscarriage, but something that's been really neglected up until now is actually looking at the male side of things and how the sperm can have a role in miscarriage. They looked at 50 couples in this study, and they found that compared to couples who hadn't had recurrent miscarriage, the men had twice the levels of DNA damage in their sperm. And this is important because the sperm's really crucial, as you'd expect, in setting up a healthy pregnancy. It's really important to the health of a placenta, which is how the fetus gets nutrients and oxygen. And this is really one of the first studies that almost marks a tipping point in this kind of research. That's realizing that the male role, of course, has just as an important role in miscarriage as the mother.
So what would the researchers want couples to take away from this, if anything?
Well, at this stage, it's quite early research. So what the researchers have to do now is look at why the DNA damage is there. It's been linked to obesity in men. It's been linked to perhaps previous infections. They did screen the couples for infections like chlamydia, which is known to affect sperm health. But there might have been other infections potentially years before that can cause damage to the prostate gland, which makes semen and sperm, and so that can have an effect. So now they've really got to drill down and see what could be causing this DNA damage to the sperm. And I guess even though there's no real advice in terms of lifestyle advice for couples, what it does do is move the research on, because traditionally the onus has always been on the woman in the couple when it's come to miscarriage. And actually this makes us realise that there's many more factors, and it could actually, the cause of miscarriage can lie with both partners.
All right, Kate, thank you very much for bringing us up to date with that. Now, Caroline Brogan is here to talk about wound healing and a little bit of inspiration from nature, aren't we?
Yeah, so this wound healing technique is a man-made technique that mimics the way our bodies naturally heal. So Ben Almquist at our Department of Bioengineering has harnessed the body's natural healing powers for healing wounds. After an injury, cells crawl through these sort of collagen scaffolds in the injury. The movement pulls on the scaffolds, which unravels the scaffold and activates healing proteins. Now, the scientists at Imperial have recreated this mechanism in a man-made kind of package called a trap, also known as traction force activated payloads. They say these new protein bundles could be used to treat a number of wounds like burns, breakages and cuts.
How far along are they with this research?
Well, they're based on something called an aptamer, which is a strand of DNA, which are already used as drugs in the market, which means that in a regulatory sense, it wouldn't take that long to come to humans. However, traps have only still been tested in the lab, so we're a while away from having them on plasters and bandages.
Great. Caroline Brogan, thank you very much indeed for telling us all about that. So then, it is the new year, and I think we can still say that as we roll towards the end of January, and we're all making plans for the year ahead, and the NHS is no different. Ryan O'Hare is here in the studio to tell us a little bit more about the NHS and its plans for the year and indeed years ahead. So Ryan, what do you know?
Hi Gareth. So that's right. Last year was a huge year for the National Health Service. It marked its 70th anniversary. And earlier this month, NHS England set out its Long Term Plan. This aims to steer the NHS through challenges ahead and set its priorities over the next decade.
And there must be a whole lot in there. So what are some of the more notable bits that you've been picking out?
Yeah, so it's obviously quite comprehensive, and they've produced a massive 120-odd page report, but there are a few main themes. Firstly, prevention and early detection of health conditions. Then there is more funding for mental health and primary care, which is more GP services and the like rather than the hospital setting. The plan also aims to tackle inequalities across the NHS, and this means more patients being able to get the same high level of care all across the country. And one of the big themes is increasing the use of technology and that sort of thing.
Okay, so you've been speaking to a few selected Imperial experts who obviously do a lot of NHS watching. So what have you been finding out from them?
Yeah, so I managed to track down and speak to 3 of our own medics in between their clinics. And first up, primary care, and Azim Majid, who is Professor of Primary Care at Imperial, and he is a GP within the NHS and also a public health consultant.
I think there's a lot of good things in the plan and a lot of positive sentiments. So the plan does propose increasing spending on primary care at a faster rate than hospital care, which is very encouraging because in recent years we've seen the opposite trend. It also has a big emphasis on prevention and early diagnosis, which again is also very encouraging. And it also wants to make better use of technology in the NHS, which again is also very encouraging.
Right, so that's Azim Majid. What about video conferencing, Skype, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so it talks about opening a digital front door with patients being able to see their GP through video calling platforms like Skype. The hope is that digital appointments could save the NHS around $1 billion a year.
There are many positive things about the IT announcements in the plan, but I think we first need to get the basics right. So if you work in the NHS, you'll be aware there are many basic IT problems. We first need very firm foundations, so we need to make sure the basic infrastructure is sound and works well. Skype or video calls do have their place. I suspect that it will be a struggle to get them in all practices in the timescale the government envisages. Also, I'm not entirely sure what value video calls add over a basic telephone call, so I'm not entirely clear about the additional benefits we get from video.
Yeah, really interesting to hear Azim Majid's thoughts on technology, Ryan. Now, another theme that you mentioned earlier was detection and prevention of health conditions. It's so important, obviously.
Well, among a number of other things, the report points to cutting deaths from long-term conditions, detecting cancers earlier, and also speaks about child health, including childhood obesity and reducing neonatal and preterm deaths. To discuss this, I managed to pin down Nina Modi, who is Professor of Neonatal Medicine at Imperial and a consultant in neonatal medicine, to get her thoughts over the phone.
It's really, really surprising and disappointing that prevention is couched purely in terms of adult screening. There seems to be precious little on the early developmental and the wider environmental determinants of chronic long-term conditions.
And one of the areas that she highlighted was a need for more joined-up health policy.
On the one hand, there is this very laudable aspiration that seeks to prevent, but simultaneously the other hand of government is cutting back on public health preventive measures. At the moment, what we're seeing is increasing fragmentation of health policy.
Now, one point that I picked up on when I was listening to all this is artificial intelligence and how that is linked to healthcare and basically how the NHS looks at AI and sees that as part of its future.
It's a really interesting one and brings together cutting-edge tech to help doctors, surgeons and nurses to make clinical decisions. For this one, I spoke to Dr. Paul Bentley. He is a clinical senior lecturer at Imperial and a neurologist who works in stroke and rehabilitation.
Mention is made in the plan of reducing deaths of patients with heart disease and stroke, as well as preventing 150,000 new cases of heart attack, strokes and dementia. Many of those ideas we wholeheartedly support to bring together both the effectiveness of treatment but also the costly nature of many of these treatments and trying to make treatments economical to benefit the largest number.
Now, Paul's team is actually working on one exciting area in particular, and that is AI to look at brain scans, and this could have huge implications for patients.
The specific mention in the report by NHS England was that artificial intelligence would be used to help interpret CT and MRI scans, supporting clinical decisions. Imperial College has taken a lead in many of the methods. So my own group, along with Daniel Ruckart in the biomedical imaging analysis group, have developed various techniques which allow for the analysis, particularly of CT scans in the very early stage of stroke, that can not only help in terms of estimating the size of the stroke, but also working out whether somebody would benefit from that, and also highlighting various hazards of the side effects, and our methods are able to quantify those much more accurately than existing methods.
That's Dr. Paul Bentley, who's been speaking to Ryan O'Hare. Ryan, thank you very much indeed for that. Well then, it's that time of year again. It's Davos, the World Economic Forum's big gathering where the world leaders and the captains of industry all get together for some very high-level discussions and talks and generally hanging out in that Swiss resort. Imperial College is always well represented. This year is no exception, and the experts from Imperial who are going to Davos this year are from the new Imperial Network for Vaccine Research, and they'll be talking all about tackling and preventing outbreaks. Hayley Dunning, you've been treated to a sneak preview of some of what they're going to be telling Davos, haven't you?
Yes, I got to hear from 3 of the top researchers who will be sharing their work on creating a platform for local vaccine manufacturing hubs, giving vaccines a longer shelf life, and even modifying chickens to prevent them getting bird flu and ultimately passing it on to us. First, I heard from Professor Robin Shattock, who leads the new network, and he started his talk by setting out just what one of the major problems with vaccines is, how fast they can be delivered in an epidemic.
Now, stand in any major city in the world and imagine there's an outbreak. How quickly could we respond? The reality is that for most countries, there's no regional mechanism able to manufacture and distribute vaccines in a meaningful time frame. Now, critically, modelling of a disease pandemic suggests for every month's delay, there'd be up to 5 million deaths. Now, that's the equivalent of losing a city the size of Rome or Singapore every month. But it's developing countries that would bear the greatest burden, accounting for up to 80% of deaths. And yet, they're likely to be last in the queue for any vaccine when it became available.
OK, so Hayley, we're talking about getting new vaccines faster and in more places. So what is Professor Shattock's solution?
Well, rather than all vaccines being made in one place and shipped out, Professor Shattock is creating a standard platform for vaccines so that the same vaccine could be easily made to the same recipe in different regions around the world.
Well, one part of the solution are RNA vaccines, because uniquely these can be made by a fully synthetic process. This means that they can be made in a very rapid timescale within a matter of weeks. Now, RNA vaccines offer 4 very important things. The first of those is rapid response. The next is the ability to target multiple pathogens within the same platform, even within the same shot. Then they have a low infrastructure cost and a very small manufacturing footprint, making them absolutely amenable to a distributed manufacturing network.
Which sounds like an ideal solution, but are there other options for making vaccines easier to distribute?
Yeah, so another project I heard about was from Professor Jason Hallett, whose solution could work together with Professor Shattock's to make vaccines much more accessible. So he's trying to eliminate the need to store vaccines at sub-zero temperatures. And they figured out they need something other than water to store vaccine proteins in order to do this. They needed something that wouldn't damage the proteins when temperatures change. For inspiration, they turned to an unlikely source.
Inspiration for this struck when we were working on producing biofuels at Imperial College. We found that certain salts, known as ionic liquids, protect proteins at high temperatures. So we thought, could these same salts be used to protect vaccines from water at room temperature? Stabilizing vaccines instead of making biofuels also required us to think in an extra dimension that we hadn't before: human contact. We don't eat or drink or inject biofuels, but we do put vaccines into people.
And that, to say the least, sounds like a real challenge. So how far have they got?
Well, they've been able to create a system where proteins are stable at high temperatures virtually forever, but they still need to pass the regulatory hurdle of making sure they're safe for humans and work out how to scale up production, potentially working with Professor Shattock's local manufacturing hubs.
So it sounds like we've got the future of vaccines sorted, we hope. But you did say there were 3 experts who are going to this Davos gathering. So what does that leave us left to address? What other solutions are we going to hear about?
The last talk by Professor Wendy Barclay described her research to actually prevent the need for vaccines in the first place, at least for bird flu epidemics.
There will be another influenza pandemic. We don't know when, we don't know what strain of virus. Our best response is a vaccine matched to the new strain, but using today's technology that will take too long, and meanwhile people will die. I want to offer an alternative approach. The source of all influenza is wild birds like ducks and geese. The avian virus can cross from those into farmed animals like chickens and pigs. It can devastate a poultry flock. Here's what I'm suggesting. If we could stop the influenza viruses from jumping from wild birds into farmed animals, we would stop the next pandemic at source. Today, we're in the middle of a revolution in genetic editing. CRISPR technology is a way to precisely alter the genome of a species to introduce beneficial new traits. We realised that we could use CRISPR technology to generate farmed animals that can't be infected by influenza viruses.
Wow, now that sounds exciting to say the least. So we're talking about flu-resistant chickens, but just how far are they through with all this?
They have actually identified a gene in the chickens that the flu virus uses to replicate itself, but they want to be careful about removing that entire gene as it could have side effects for the animal. So instead, they're using CRISPR technology to be as precise as possible.
The good news is that we've already identified the smallest change that can stop the virus in its tracks. Using CRISPR technology, we can precisely engineer just that one tiny change into the animal, and the rest of the animal stays exactly the same. And later this year, our first gene-edited chicks will be hatched, and we will challenge them with an influenza virus to see that they really are resistant to flu.
That's Wendy Barclay, who's on her way to Davos with those other researchers, and she's been speaking to Hayley Dunning. Hayley, thank you very much indeed for that. Well, finally, it's not every day that we get a tattoo artist in Imperial College's main entrance, but in February, that's just what will be happening as part of our next Imperial Late event, which is all about smart fashion. It happens to coincide with London Fashion Week. Now, your tat may one day literally be a lifesaver, thanks to Imperial research into smart tattoos that, amongst other things, could help those with diabetes to monitor their blood sugar. Our reporter Kieran Brophy has been treated to a sneak preview from one of our researchers as he gears up to show off his wares, yes, pun intended, at that event. It's also been a chance for Kieran to survey the wider world of wearables.
Many of us today already have some form of fitness tracking band or smartwatch that could notify us about emails, calls, social media messages, and even how many steps to take before you can brag to your friends. The rapid increase in wearable tech has meant that the market is expected to be worth over $30 billion by 2020, and their uses are growing by the day. Ali Yattison, a newly arrived lecturer to Imperial from MIT, is at the forefront of this exciting field. Ali and his team of researchers look at developing medical devices and sensors that can be worn to give clinical or point-of-care diagnostics in a minimally invasive way. From room 507 of the ACE extension in the Chemical Engineering Department, plans are afoot that would turn an unassuming lab into something to rival Q's lair from James Bond.
What we realize is that tattoos could be a great platform for designing different types of chemical sensors and make these tattoos to be applicable to basically anybody.
Tattoos that can monitor your health all sounds fantastically futuristic. But what can Ali possibly hope to measure with his tattoos?
One main application is in glucose monitoring. So this is very critical especially for diabetic patients who needs to maintain a tight control of their sugar levels in their body. And our sensors change color from, let's say, green to red as the concentration of the glucose changes in your blood. And these tattoos are inked just right under the skin, so they don't have any contact with the blood samples. But there's a plasma leakage from the blood, and we can use this as a surrogate for estimating blood sugar concentrations in this case. Another application of these sensors are in, for example, dehydration monitoring. So let's say you are exercising on a daily basis and you want to control the electrolyte concentration in your body. So in our work, we've also designed colorimetric sensors for monitoring electrolytes such as sodium, potassium, calcium, and magnesium, important electrolytes in your body.
Ali's harnessing the power of the everyday smartphone camera and its capacity to discern colour much more sensitively than our own eyes.
So we take, for example, a smartphone camera and we capture an image of the tattoo, and using this, a smartphone algorithm converts this colorimetric information to concentration values. So it can provide you information in real time. You can sense this at point of care settings when you're exercising. It's quite convenient. Also, this data can be also sent, for example, if your GP's office or your fitness instructor. So it has a lot of applications. In specifically, we are talking about personalized medicine as well as performance enhancement for athletes as well. So it has broad applications in these areas.
Pondering Ali's tattoos, I took a stroll across Hyde Park, as you do, where I just so happened to bump into Houtan Ashrafian on the St. Mary's Hospital campus. He's not only a practicing surgeon, he's also the Chief Scientific Advisor for the Institute for Global Health and Innovation. Houtan began by giving me the 101 on how the medical world is embracing wearable technology.
One of the big projects that we're doing is on sepsis. Sepsis is a condition where one's body has an immunological reaction to a source of either an infection or inflammation. And that reaction can become very serious. It can shut down multiple body organs. People can die as a result. If you are, however, able to intervene on that soon enough, then it would bypass that whole process. So it's a condition that we understand well in terms of its outcomes. It's a condition that we don't understand so well in terms of its prediction or its identification in terms of speed. And the digital technology is something that could answer that gap by giving us the clues immediately as to when a patient goes off. And so we have a sensor that we're using in our trial based at Imperial, but at a clinical site at West Middlesex Hospital, where we put this device that was from a company that spun out from Imperial several years ago called Sensium. It's a non-invasive device that's stuck onto a patient's body, and this device is able to then identify heart rate, temperature, and respiratory rate. It is continually sending out digital signals. When some of these go beyond a standard or beyond the rates that they're meant to, suddenly then the data that is given can then be acted on through an alerting mechanism. Through this digital technology, we'll also be able to lead to faster interventions and ultimately save lives.
So, wearable tech is already saving lives, but what does Houtan make of Ali and his wearable tattoos?
Ali's work is innovative, both in terms of its technical ability, but in a practical ability that every patient has a need to be assessed in their own environment. And having a tool that can then assess what's going on through the patient's skin, that's where I think Ali's work would have a powerful effect on future healthcare.
So there you have it. Tattoos that look good and could provide the basis for new forms of diagnosis in the future. And just in case you're wondering where you can go to see Ali's tattoos in the flesh, he will be manning the Institute for Molecular Science and Engineering stand at the upcoming Imperial Leiden Wearable Technology, which takes place on February the 21st. It should make for an interesting evening, but don't come expecting a free tat.
This is going to be a really exciting demonstration for us as well. We will be displaying a wide range of tattoos. We will have a tattoo artist. We will be showing tattoos that are sensitive to a wide range of analytes. So this will include, for example, our pH tattoo sensors, glucose tattoo sensors. You will also see our recent work on the fluorescent tattoos. So this type of tattoos do not change color, but they change in light intensity, so they become brighter as the specific sort of stimuli changes in your body. So we will demonstrate that for electrolyte monitoring in this event.
So does that mean if I go and see your stand, I can get a free colourful tattoo?
Obviously, this is at the research stage, but what you will be getting is a great demonstration and a few mock samples that possibly you can even take away with you to show it to your friends.
That's Ali Yetterson ending that report from Kieran Brophy. And to sign up for that Imperial Late event on Smart Fashion on the evening of Thursday, the 21st of February, the smart thing to do is visit imperial.ac.uk/festival and click on Imperial Lates. And there you can register for free. Put that date in your diary. Thursday, the 21st of February in the evening. So that brings us to the end of this edition. Thank you very much for your company as ever. Just before I go, a quick reminder that you can check out our news website. It's at imperial.ac.uk/news. Well, I'm Gareth Mitchell, and I'll be back next month. See you then. Bye-bye.